cannot heal what you don't begin to be honest about. Just like you cannot regulate what you fail to be honest about, what you fail to feel. All of it goes hand in hand. You want other people to find a way to make room for your attachment style without you actually doing the necessary work to begin giving yourself what you need, showing up in relationships in the most healthy way, and stop blaming other people for where you aren't or where you are. Massive differences doesn't always look like going directly from an anxious attachment to a secure in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Sometimes it looks like simply one, a huge win in becoming aware of where your anxious attachment is showing up. I'm secure. I'm fully secure. I know me. I know my worth. And behind closed doors, the moment somebody leaves you on red, your mind going crazy. Let me be somebody who humbles you and tells you real quick, not only do you not deserve everything and anything, but people do not owe you a response. That is actually a measurement of control, not a measurement of security. We convinced ourselves that the why is the key to our freedom, when in reality, we've had the key to freedom the entire time. And it actually isn't in discovering the why. It's just simply accepting the relationship for what it is. Yo, party fam, what's happening? Welcome back to another episode of The Process with your boy, Coach Sean. So glad that you decided to join us in this amazing conversation today, because this seems to be a more prevalent conversation that I'm seeing so many people throughout the weeks and throughout the days just continue to react and respond to a specific post that I made on my social media account, specifically my TikTok. If you aren't following me there, please do. All my handles, Coach Sean Walker, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, so on and so forth. There's a post I made regarding anxious attachment, and I just thought it was only right to just put it into an entire podcast episode just to give people some more insight as to what anxious attachment really can look like on the surface. Where does it stem from? And more importantly, how can we go about this, healing it biblically? And so I really want to first start out with the roots of anxious attachment. But before we even get to the roots of anxious attachment, first, let me say a few things. One, that this is something that I've dealt with, something that I have not only put in effort and time to heal through, but even actively continuing to heal away from towards secure attachment. Okay, so just know that this is not coming from a perfection. This is not coming from an expertise. This is not coming from somebody who has just completely healed all the way through, right? I think one of the best tests, or one of the best indicators to know, is, of course, continuing to build relationships, but get connected to somebody that you're interested in. Get connected to somebody that you really want to build and do relationships with, do life with, and see where it's at, right? This for me was definitely exposed in previous dating experiences, and it took some time before I actually came to a realization that this was actually something I was dealing with. I had the language for it and really processing it healthily. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to let you know. Second thing is, with any attachment style, doesn't matter if you're anxious, doesn't matter if you're avoidant, secure, if you're anxious avoidant, if you're narcissistic avoidant, however we want, dismissive avoidant, right? All these different nuances to the three core attachment styles. You have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to heal it. It's all on you, right? And it comes from so many different places. It comes from different experiences and different backgrounds. But the one thing that we cannot do is put the onus on doing the healing work on other people. Meaning, I cannot force somebody else to act a particular way so that way my anxiety doesn't trigger, or so that my avoidance doesn't go crazy, or so that my narcissistic tendencies don't show up, or my dismissiveness has a priority or placement in the connection, in the conversation, in the relationship. No, this is on you. Okay. And the first thing that we have to understand is we have to own the attachment style. We have to own and be honest with the attachment style that we have, with the attachment style that we're building, and actually deal with it effectively, because you cannot heal what you don't begin to be honest about. Just like you cannot regulate what you fail to be honest about, what you fail to feel. All of it goes hand in hand. Okay. And so I just think that's the first thing that we have to really establish in this entire conversation, because there's so much room, I should say, so much room and opportunity to just push this out, to deflect, and then to put this on other people. Well, if my mom was this, and if my dad was this, and if this person was that, and this person was that. And don't get me wrong, I do think there is a moment in season and time where we acknowledge that, where we validate that, right? A lot of that stuff, especially the matter that as deep as it can go, especially maybe to perhaps traumatic wounds. This is a very sincere, serious conversation, right? And so it can require a little bit more work than maybe what's given in this episode. But I do want to make mention that this episode is for people who either have no idea that this is something you're working with, or you do and you're just wanting other people to work around it. Okay, you just want other people to work around it. You want other people to deal with it. You want other people to find a way to make room for your attachment style without you actually doing the necessary work to begin giving yourself what you need, showing up in relationships in the most healthy way, and stop blaming other people for where you aren't or where you are. This is for you. Okay. And this ain't going to be cute. This ain't going to be pretty, but it is going to be necessary. All right. So the first thing that I want to deal with is the roots of anxious attachment. And there's two roots that I've learned specifically regarding anxious attachment that this is placed. Number one, like any other attachment style, anxious attachment style definitely roots in your childhood, definitely roots in your relationship with your parents, whether you had one or you didn't. Okay. And just to be clear, you can easily have anxious attachment coming from parents in a two-parent household, one-parent household, whether it was your caregiver, somebody who took care of you, maybe it wasn't your parents or directly your biological parents. These are things that you pick up on, okay? Believe it or not, your attachment style or the attachment styles, they're not necessarily passed down hereditarily, okay? They're not passed down through your DNA. It's not like when you were born and your parent was this type of attachment style, then this is the attachment style that you ultimately come up with. It's just in the manner in which you were raised, in the manner in which conflict was handled, in the manner that you were basically programmed through your parents and through relationship to them, how love was to be perceived, and then also how conflict was to be handled. Okay, so that's the first thing that you really want to deal with. And this is oftentimes where you hear people talk about their inner child wounds, right? What their inner child is needing, what you were neglecting, all that kind of language that you might hear repetitively through social media waves. They're specifically more than likely talking about an attachment style, but of course it could be a lot of other things, but it does have a connection to the attachment style. And regarding anxious attachment style, these specifically are individuals who, in the midst of conflict, in the midst of challenge, in the midst of love or experiencing love, the first thing you want to do is cling. Okay, these are the people who chase, right? So you have a chaser in the anxious, you have a runner in the avoidant, and you have the stabilizer in the secure. Okay, again, we're just addressing the main three: anxious, avoidant, secure. Of course, in this conversation, anxious. With the anxious, you're chasing. Okay, this is the person that is easily wanting to not just figure out why and get all the answers to everything, but in the moment of something being absent, the first instinct is to chase, is to pursue, and is to figure it all out. And there are different signs that we're going to get into as we dive deeper into this conversation. But just to set a precedence for it, the anxious is defined as the one who chases. Anxious is defined as the one who chases. Okay. And this often comes from inner child wounds. Okay. And just to give you some pictures of what this could look like from an inner child wound perspective, from how you were raised. I mean, it could look like an abundance of things. So these are not the only examples. But for example, having an absent parent in the home, maybe dad wasn't around, mom wasn't around. Maybe you picked up on different indicators that relationships and love was always and only temporary. Mom was always bringing some guy over who you always knew as an X, Y, and Z. And so it kind of programmed you to believe that love come and goes. Love is inconsistent. Love is very wavering. Maybe in the midst of the context to the connection and relationship with your parents, Maybe you picked up on this idea of needing to always be in a hurry. Everything had to be done, not just done quickly and done right now, but there was always some extreme that was going to happen if it didn't get finished, if it didn't get finished on time, if it didn't happen in the manner that it was instructed to take place, right? It all programmed your mind into believing that the worst was going to happen if something that was requested of you wasn't done immediately. Let me give you another example. Maybe you continuously experienced love being a reward system type of deal. You needed love when you were a child, needed to be affirmed, needed to be accepted, needed to be acknowledged of how amazing, wonderful, beautiful, awesome you are, or the work you were doing. You wanted to be congratulated. You wanted to be hugged. You wanted to be validated. And yet what was left from your parents was actually the opposite. You weren't validated. You weren't acknowledged. You weren't accepted. Instead, you were constantly met with neglect. You were constantly met with being dismissed and ignored. You were constantly told that in order to actually get some kind of acknowledgement, get some kind of appraisal and hand clap, you had to do something extravagant. Love was often a reward system. It wasn't something that was just naturally given to you because of who you were according to them. You weren't really only loved and cared for and thought of to be the best thing ever and celebrated simply because you were their daughter, you were their son. It often came with this risk and reward type of system. And this is often, again, what continues to cohabitate an anxious attachment. All right. And of course, there's a lengthy of examples that we could give, but hopefully you're getting the picture that love was often presented and pictured as something you had to earn, something you had to perform for, and something that was never lasting. And so in order to almost convince yourself that you could be loved or that you deserved love, or that in order for love to stay, you felt you had to chase it, perform for it in order to cling to it, right? And this easily, again, comes from so many various different descriptions in the inner child space from your childhood. And hopefully this is sparking up some other thoughts that might be relatable to you. So that's the first root, okay? And you have to understand this, especially when it comes to even the relationship with your parents, right? Regardless of whether or not they shared the same attachment style or maybe they had something different. I want you to just keep this in mind. This might be one of the first notes that you make outside of what we've already talked about so far. And of course, I typically forget to mention this, but please grab your notebooks, grab your pens, grab your pencils, man. We're journaling, we're writing, we're taking some notes because you're going to be the smartest person wherever you go next, okay, in some of these conversations. The first thing that I want you to write down outside of that is noting that even though this came from your childhood, this is not your parents' responsibility to heal. Even though this came from your childhood, this is not the responsibility of your parents to heal. I know that they weren't around. I know they were inconsistent. I know that their love was not really the greatest picture, and you were left with crumbs. You were left feeling neglected, feeling unwanted. You didn't really have a positive relationship with celebration, positive relationship with who you are, or how to engage with other people effectively without fearing they were going to leave you if you did not perform enough for them. I know that there was a lot in that wasn't given to you. You can't wait for your parents to start doing right, living right, or being who you needed them to be in order for you to start actually dealing with these wounds effectively. At some point, we have to take the ownership and say, even though this is what I was left with, this is what I'm going to choose to do about it moving forward. That's healthy. And that's helpful for who I'm trying to be and where I'm trying to go. Okay. So that's not just with anxious attachment. That's with avoidant. That's with any other description that we want to give to the attachment styles. Okay. And I do want to continue to preface this that this stuff can go deep. Okay. Like this whole conversation can definitely be extreme and be lengthy. And so just know that these are beginning conversations. And this is something that not only have I learned, but I'm continuing to learn with. And I'm just inviting you to learn it with me. All right. So relationship with parents, that's the first root of anxious attachment. The second root is fear. Okay. We referenced this a little bit in discussing about the parents. But fear is easily the biggest descriptor of the anxiously attached. Okay. Anxious attachment, anxiety. Anxiety is especially defined, I think, as well, not I think, but anxiety is often defined as fearing the future, right? You're fearing something that has yet to happen. Okay. It's all these stories that we cultivate, that we curate in our minds, that gets our minds racing, our bodies racing, our hearts racing. And it brings about a level of uncomfortability and a level of lack of ease from actually being able, at least in the moment, to feel like we can be present. So we're constantly thinking about the future, things that we have yet to experience, that because we don't feel we are where we should be to actually make that future a reality, no matter how positive it is, it brings about a level of fear. It sets us back and it makes us feel like, right, not only is that unachievable, but I'm crazy for even believing that it could be achievable. Okay. And so false evidence appearing real is the acronym that I actually want you to write down when it comes to fear. Okay. False evidence appearing real. And this is an acronym that I hope can help you understand a little bit better about really what fear is trying to create in your thinking. And it's literally trying to tell you that something that isn't there is there, and something that is there isn't there. It kind of works both ways in a tandem. But in reality, when it comes to anxious attachment specifically, I know there's a proverb that reminds us of the perspective of a lazy man. And this is mentioned throughout the Proverbs, but one specifically where he speaks about the lazy man believes there's a lion in the middle of the road. Right. And it's this perspective that the lazy man just continues to believe that something is there when it's not. Something is holding him back from doing what he wants to do when it's not. It's literally just all that he's creating up here. And that's not to say that you're lazy for having anxious attachment. What it is connecting is that the anxious attachment often thrives in this fear. It's you're fearful of rejection. You're fearful of abandonment. You're fearful that this person, if they didn't text you back fast enough, is going to leave you, is not wanting you, right? There's a lot of stories that we begin attaching someone else's behaviors towards that we're making it about us. And so there's a big question that we have to consider when it comes to addressing this healthily, is we have to really begin asking ourselves, what do I believe this person doing this says about me? What do I believe that this person not doing said thing says about me? Because oftentimes this fear is rooted in an identity crisis where we're struggling to believe, or we're struggling to separate somebody else's behavior as a reflection of who we are. We're struggling to differentiate that. We typically want to do is attach their behaviors as a direct correlation to who we are, who we are not. And this is often a reflection of what we'll learn is our emotions telling our thoughts what to think. Because our emotions are uneasy, because our emotions are filled with fear, filled with trepidation, filled with just a lot of scarcity, filled with lack, this sadness, this grief, this neediness that we're experiencing, that we're portraying, it's all coming from this place where we're afraid of said person leaving us. And so what we'll do is we'll convince ourselves that we need to do this, do that, and do the third. We need to do this, do that, do the third. We'll perform in hopes that enough performance will keep them there. And this performance can look like a variety of things. Sex, drugs, can look like just compromising on our values. This person is the cutest person I've ever seen, and so I want to keep them on my shoulder at all times. So I'll send triple, quadruple, 5, 6, 7 back-to-back text messages as measurements of reassurance, right? I want to perform, so I want to look how they want me to look. Whatever they do, whatever they say, I'll do, right? You'll kind of start worshiping the ground they walk on in some aspect, as if they can do no wrong, and then convincing yourself at the same time that this is the best it'll get. And this is literally what the anxious attachment does over time. Not only is it abandonment and rejection, it won't get better, but there's stories that are tied to our beliefs. And this is why this is the note that you want to take down as we're really unpacking this. And if it sounds like we're going in a hurry, it may be because we are. But also, again, this is something we'll revisit. We can continue to rehash in different layers. But this is just a beginning conversation I want you to have regarding anxious attachment. This is why, as part of healing, we have to address our beliefs first before we deal with our emotions. Before we deal with our emotions, we have to address our beliefs, our thinking patterns, our perspectives. And this is also something that's beautiful that I'm learning recently and that I'm continuing to study on, especially when it comes to psychology, is that when it comes to addressing beliefs, it's actually not always as simple as maybe we will portray it to be. In the sense that there's a lot of neuron transmitters, things that are flashing in our brains when we are experiencing emotional connections to certain people or certain things. Our brains are literally being programmed to develop these synapses that build stronger and stronger, that also give off stronger and stronger emotions, depending on how strong of a connection we are having with, perhaps in this specific conversation, a specific person, right? Or a specific feeling. And so when we talk about dealing with the mind in and of itself, we have to be mindful that it's not just a process and something that we have to learn to be gracious with ourselves towards, but it's something that if we want to see change, takes repetition, discipline, and consistency to do. A lot of times in these conversations, we think as soon as we get this and we get to something like this, we get to a podcast, we hear it, it makes sense, we comprehend it, and it might even be something as deep as a revelation. But then we really don't know how to apply it, or we think after applying it a few times, we should get it by now. And so when the next opportunity comes where the same wound shows up just in a different manner from a different situation, not only do we then throw away all of our progress, but we convince ourselves we were never healing in the first place. Or we convince ourselves that we were doing it wrong, right? Or this doesn't work. It's stupid. I should have never believed it. No, it just actually takes repetition, discipline, and consistency to see a difference, okay? And massive differences doesn't always look like going directly from an anxious attachment to a secure in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Sometimes it looks like simply a huge win in becoming aware of where your anxious attachment is showing up. Is it in the text messages? Is it in the delay of text messages? Is it in the fact that you reached out, you said something, and you were waiting by the phone for this person's response for days at a time or for hours and minutes at a time? You were constantly checking your phone every 5 minutes, right? All these symptoms are things that I've done. So hopefully this is speaking something specifically to you. Maybe it wasn't that your willingness to overthink and overanalyze, right? You begin to fill in the gaps as to maybe why this person wasn't what you thought they were or where you thought they would be, or why they weren't responding to you as fast as they should be if they were really interested. Is there somebody else? Am I not enough? Am I not the right guy? Am I not the right girl? Right? All these things and questions that we begin to dive headfirst into as it relates to the behaviors of other people. Again, there's that connecting their behaviors to our identity that we're struggling with. And so all these stories, right, we don't necessarily want to start with the emotions that those stories are bringing up. We actually want to first acknowledge the emotion. Okay, dude, I'm feeling real. Ooh, this is getting heavy. I'm feeling real fearful. But, I get why I'm feeling. Okay, I see why I'm feeling real fearful. It's because I'm associating this person's distance as to them leaving. Like they went quiet on me. They stopped talking to me for about a few minutes, a few hours. So I'm associating that to mean that they're no longer interested in me, right? Acknowledging the belief, because that belief, one, has come from someplace. Again, going back to the relationship with parents, going back to the inner child, going back to childhood experiences. This comes from someplace. And for some of us, let me say this too. For some of us, even though it does have its roots in parental experiences and childhood experiences, but don't get me wrong, some of us are also just picking up on stuff. Some of us are also just picking up on crazy social media trends and believing all these social media expectations. Like, if she's interested, she's going to do this, do this, do this. If he's interested, he's going to do this, do this, do this. Right. And no one's really considering, okay, well, from a healed perspective, if I'm taking social media expectations out of the way and I come to an actual foundational space, right, what does it look like? Like, we're picking up on a lot of stuff from social media. And sometimes we just need to put our phones down. Sometimes you just need to get off of social media and stop listening to everybody, because not every bit of content is worth consuming, because oftentimes that's also what's igniting some of that attachment. That it's igniting it. And if you're not careful, will also give you an excuse to stay there, because we live in a generation and a time where people are always trying to get other people to change instead of actually reflecting on where you need to do the work to change so you can be someone who others can enjoy being around a little bit better. so that you're not claiming for people to be a specific way for you to live and be at peace. So you aren't running around acting crazy, delusional, and dysfunctional because somebody did not do what you hope they would do or become who you hope they would become, that would give you permission to date them, to have relationship with them, right? Like, we have to be willing to look at that and look, just really reflect on ourselves. This is why the biggest part about healing is honesty and self-awareness. Shout out Dr. Zeb again. I'm going to quote this all the time over here because it's so impactful. It's helped me a lot. Be aware, self-aware, being honest about who you are, where you are, what you're doing, where you're going. It's extremely important because without it, you're going to be cooked. You're going to be cooked. And it's these kinds of conversations that you won't actually benefit from because you're always thinking about somebody else and not thinking about, okay, where am I at in this? I don't know anyone who goes from anxious to secure in a day, in a snap of a finger, in a moment. Even after watching something like this and you get some deeper understanding on it, I don't believe that you will go from anxious to secure just like that. It takes repetition, consistency, and discipline. Again, what we talked about with the brain, the neurons, the synapses, all these things that are happening that are building up, right? And we're talking about addressing years of this stuff. So it doesn't mean that it will take us years to come out of it. That's the beautiful thing about the God we serve and also the work that we're able to do and at the rate at which we do it. But it is important to take our time. Take our time and be patient with this stuff, because this is something that we have to consistently come back to and deal with in order to effectively move forward. So roots of attachment. We talked about fear. We talked about the relationship with your parents. We talked about the childhood experiences. Okay. So now I want to go into the signs of an anxious attachment. And these are going to be a few, and maybe some that you didn't consider. These are some that I know I've experienced. I know others around me who have dealt with the same attachment wound, who may still be dealing with the same attachment wound, have experienced, have communicated, who have verbalized it. But these are signs that I think are really, really important to catch on to, that should draw some curiosity on whether or not you have it, you know someone who has it, or you can just see it. And some signs you might not even consider, right? But I want you to think about it. We've addressed a few so far, but I want to go kind of rather quickly on some of these, okay? So the first sign that I want to do is show you is that oftentimes anxious people overthink. These are where the overthinkers rest. Okay. And overthinking definitely has this idea or perspective of hoarding a lot of information or feeling as if you have to be perfect in everything. It's a perfectionism type deal. There's so much that you have to keep up track with, that you have to keep tabs with. And sometimes because of maybe, you know, this could spill into work, this could spill into your relationships, because of so much that you're trying to keep up with, it spills into your relationship. And so oftentimes when it comes to being an overthinker, your ability to rest and relax seems impossible, right? And you almost get this paralysis by analysis, right? You know, there's this aspect of wisdom where we do want to calculate our moves and take calculated risks. And then there are some decisions that we'll make that we claim is wisdom, or some things that we think on or that we claim we're processing through that we claim is wisdom. But in reality, it could be a multitude of things. Maybe I just don't even want to address this right now, so I'm putting it on pause. Maybe I don't want to admit I'm wrong, so I'm just going to claim I'm processing, right, as a measurement of shutting down, which is more so an avoidant perspective, but perhaps that's something to consider. But then there's also the overanalyzing, in the sense that I want to be sure that everything is calculated to the T, because I want to stick to the script as close as possible, because this is what I think it should look like. So any moment that this is out of place, then my mind begins to run. My mind begins to hurry, and I can no longer relax and be at peace. This is where the overthinker lives. I've wrestled with overthinking. I still have to catch myself in moments of overthinking. It's important to slow down. Slow down. Come back to the present, because oftentimes overthinking takes us away from the present and takes us to what? Places of anxiety, where we're thinking so much and so far down the line that we are no longer conscientious of what's happening around us in the moment, right? So overthinking and overanalyzing, huge indicators of anxious attachment. Here's the next one: a constant need for reassurance. Ooh, Lord, y'all, constant need for reassurance is massive. Okay, these are for the people that not only need to know where the relationship stands every hour of every day, but also believe that the relationship is not in good hands when the smallest, slightest inconvenience takes place. Okay. These are the people who, again, and I want to be prefaces this because I do think, again, people who have experienced traumatic things, poor past relationships, you're moving from those spaces, right? This is how you view relationships and how you expect relationships to go, because these are the only experiences you've had from previous relationships where it wasn't consistent, where you didn't know where they were going and what they were doing. You couldn't trust what they would say because they said one thing and do another, right? And so you never really knew where the relationship was. And so a lot of times that's your initial response to certain relationships. But hear me when I say this, again, going back to the beginning of everything we said here, it's your responsibility to take care of that. And your constant need for reassurance is typically a sign that you're oftentimes not okay with you. You're not okay with where you are, with who you are, and you need constant reassurance. Another term that we could really tie in here, constant need for validation, because you feel that without them and without this relationship, you feel you don't have much to lean on. And that's more of a you problem, not a them problem. That's more of you needing to become more secure in who you are, that then allows you to become more secure in where the relationship stands. You know, the people that always sending text messages back to back to back, checking in. You know, I did this where you're always sending check-in messages, right? But your check-in message isn't necessarily always because you're checking in on what this person was doing, as if you don't know what they're doing, or as if you didn't just send a message 5 minutes ago, or you didn't just send a message a day ago, right? It's more of trying to see, okay, is this relationship still in good standing? They haven't sent a message to me in a couple days. I know they said they're busy, but I don't really know. Right. And so my mind is running. And this doesn't always have to be in romantic relationships. It can be friendships, too. I know she said she was busy, but gosh, I don't know. So I'm going to send this check-in message because I really want to know and be sure that there's nothing wrong. You know, those people that always ask, are we okay? Are we okay? Right. The slightest disagreement that happened and you're in fear that you're about to lose a relationship. So then you go back and you start asking all the questions. Hey, can I be honest with you? Is this a safe space? Can I trust you? Right. And again, these are real signs that anxiety is starting to try to take over. Right. And again, this in no way, shape or form is trying to clown anyone who has an anxious attachment. You're talking to somebody who is actively healing and recovering from such. Right. What I'm telling you, though, is that the constant need for reassurance oftentimes comes from a discombobulated soul who does not really know too much about where they are without said person, without said thing, without said connection. And so there's a lack of security, and that lack of security is always going to be a struggle, especially if you're connected to somebody who's a secure attachment. Somebody who's a secure attachment, those people typically kind of get annoyed real fast, right? Because because you're always asking where the relationship stands every day. And when it comes time to explaining it, like why you feel that way, it's typically a feeling. See, this is why we have to address the beliefs, because we'll typically run to the feeling to explain what we're feeling or what we're dealing with, right? Or why we're doing what we're doing. But oftentimes it's a belief that's attached to the feeling. Right? That's first rooted, that then is encouraging us to feel a certain way, then encouraging us to behave a certain way. Right? So your constant need for reassurance, it shows up through your daily text messages, your good morning, good night text messages that you always send. Maybe it's the double and triple text, right? You're constantly asking, what are we in terms of the relationship, even though the relationship is already defined. Every conflict and disagreement that happens, you're questioning whether or not the relationship is going to stay or fall apart. And the disagreement can be as small as whether or not y'all agreed on ice cream flavors for the night, or something as big as maybe a legitimate argument because y'all just had a disagreement. And so there's that typical nudge in you that's pushing you to believe that this is not going well. So I need reassurance. I need to be sure we are where we are. Right. And that's typically the conversation. There's that lack of relaxation. This kind of goes with the previous two. Lack of relaxation. You don't feel you have the ability to be calm. I got a great analogy that hopefully makes this make sense. You know, and I guess there's a couple of analogies that can make this make sense. But, you know, my sister has a dog. I don't even know what breed this dog is, but if you ask me, it's probably the most annoying dog we've ever had in this household. Okay. And we've had 2 other dogs since as family dogs. Is her dog, just to be sure, just to be clear. But man, oh my goodness, this dog is like literally, I don't know if I think she's been diagnosed with anxiety, literally. But here's what's so funny is that no matter what happens, if she leaves the room or if she's staying in the room and somebody else enters the room, this dog goes crazy. This dog does not relax. This dog does not know how to take a breath. This dog is literally in her cage, circling around, barking, hollering, whining, whether she leaves the room to go eat, to go get some water, to come downstairs, or she's in the room, wide awake, chilling, and somebody else may enter the room and she begins to go crazy as if an intruder walked in. And this is every day. Okay. But here's what I've learned as I've like observed this dog more and more, and especially learning more about the anxious attachment, is this is exactly what a lot of us look like when it comes to dealing with other people. They can go to the gym for a workout and you are aware that they do it because it's a part of their daily routine, and you can't relax because the first thing you're thinking about is what? Is he cheating? Who is he talking to? Who is she dealing with? Can I trust her to make it back home? Right? All these different overthinking, analyzing, crazy thoughts that, again, are attached to beliefs that we have to grow curious as to where they even came from and where they originated. Right? People who the slightest inconvenience, not even inconvenience, but just the slightest shift in tone, the slightest shift in how something was said or how something was done. Typically, they give you your plate at 7:00. This time they gave you your plate at 7:02. And you automatically thinking, something's wrong. Something's off. Do they not like me anymore? The inability to relax. There's not a moment in the connection and relationship that you feel you can actually rest at peace in. And that's often because of the anxious attachment that's got you scurrying to different conclusions that don't exist, to different problems that aren't problems, and making different connections based off of beliefs you have about relationships, about people, about love. From what? Your relationship with your parents, childhood spaces, and also, if we wanted to add to it, just the social media expectations that you've been carrying and you've been adding to as you've been journeying along that aren't helpful and aren't healthy. Okay. A lack of relaxation. Then there's fake security. Now, this is an interesting one. I know I am guilty of this. You can easily put on this facade and tell everybody you're secure. You tell everybody who's around you, I'm secure, I'm secure, I'm secure, I'm secure, I'm full of secure. I know me, I know my worth. And behind closed doors, the moment somebody leaves you on red, your mind going crazy. The moment somebody doesn't make an appearance to something that you thought they would or you expected them to, you begin to believe that the relationship is not worth it, or you begin to believe that the relationship was never something to be built on in the first place. God forbid they didn't send you a happy birthday text message. So you went on Snapchat in a passive aggressive manner and you said to everybody who didn't send me a happy birthday text message, consider yourself blocked. You posted on your Instagram stories, you posted on your Snapchat, and it's all passive aggression. But there's also this little bit of anxious attachment that's clear as day there, right? Because you portray and you project this picture of yourself to be secure, to love yourself, to be full of who you are. But at your core, you are bothered to the soul that this person isn't talking to you, that this person left you on red, that this person took a few hours to respond, right? And it never crosses your mind that maybe it's been a busy day. It never crosses your mind that this person has a schedule. This person has a lot going for them. It never crosses your mind that there was just a level of expectation that you had on them that was a little too much and out of bounds for where the relationship really is. And so you begin to believe that something else is going on. It's the fake security. It's got a whole mask on it. You know, those people that just go on social media all day and parade and talk about how secure they are. Right? You talk about it a lot more than you actually are about it because you really aren't about it. And that's proof. That's literal proof in the pudding. And it's crazy because other people may not even necessarily see it, but you know it. Yeah, I mean, you got the act of someone who is secure, down packed. You got it. You got it. But deep down, you're bothered, sweating at night, can't sleep. Yeah. Yeah, this is the real deal when it comes to anxious attachment. You know somebody is moving as if they actually have security when they don't, when they constantly have to tell you they're secure. They constantly have to remind you that they're secure. You constantly have to tell other people how secure you are. Nobody's stunting that. You ain't fooling nobody but yourself. Let's take a look at another one, right? Your constant need to know why. This is a huge one. Oh, this is a huge one. I remember for me, okay, and I've moved like this for a while. And I think there's some nuances that are deserved in this kind of conversation, because I do think on one hand, clarity in and of itself is not a bad thing. So somebody giving you clarity on something is more so a blessing and is more so something to just simply be grateful for if it is given. And I do think it has its benefits, because with clarity comes full on understanding, right? On the flip side, I think this idea of needing to know why also comes from an entitled perspective, especially for those of us who have this anxious attachment, and especially for those of you who refuse to heal this and own it. You make everybody else dance around you and demand that you get answers and demand that you're told what the deal is. And you demand to know why they didn't respond. You demand to know why they left you. You demand to know why there wasn't a second date. You demand. And there's this level of entitlement that I think social media has, again, continued to portray along so many other avenues that convince you that you deserve everything. You deserve an answer. You deserve this and you deserve that. Let me be somebody who humbles you and tells you real quick, not only do you not deserve everything and anything, but people do not owe you a response. That is actually a measurement of control, not a measurement of security. You demand an answer because if you were to get an answer, you would do a few things. Either morph into the type of person that you think they want you to be, so you don't have to deal with being alone. Maybe you want the answer so that way you can control the narrative. So that way you can go on social media and TikTok and create your story time and create the narrative of who this person is when it doesn't even match who they really were. You just want the upper hand. You want your audience. Again, there comes that fake security, right? I'm going to project. I'm going to tell them all about who this person wasn't and do it in a manner of convincing myself I'm telling them so they can stay away from you, not actually what it really is. You're telling and exposing it so that way you can get the upper hand on that person. Oh, you know what's real crazy? It's the passive aggressiveness that also shows up. I think that's another sign, and I'll get to that in a second. But your constant need to know why is huge, because you can't move on without knowing why. It's a huge struggle. And sometimes, again, I even bring scripture into this, of course, because we're here designed to do biblical relationships, right? Proverbs 3 verse 5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And I think there's a vast ways we can actually start leaning on our own understanding. But one of them is us constantly chasing other people to get a why, because we believe and we convince ourselves that if we knew why, we would get over them. We would be able to let them go. We would be able to move forward and move on. And in reality, we've convinced ourselves that the why is the key to our freedom, when in reality, we've had the key to freedom the entire time. And it actually isn't in discovering the why. It's just simply accepting the relationship for what it is, accepting the outcome for what it is. Because let's be honest, if we were to go and ask why, does that really change anything? For most of us, no. I know that there's a few that we could reflect on and we could say, hey, they went and asked why. And they always have this testimony. Thank God they asked why, because they learned why and the relationship grew stronger. They reconnected, they reconciled, and they eventually, if they were dating, got married. All these different stories. That's like exception to the rule, though. That's not the rule. And so we have to be careful with taking the exceptions to the rule and then putting that as a mandate to the entire rule. That's not always the case. Oftentimes, y'all, people know what they're doing. Yeah. And it hurts to hear it that way, but I just want to kick it straight to you. Oftentimes people know what they're doing. People know what they're doing, and people spend time on the things they care for They make time for the things they want to make time for. And sometimes we just aren't that choice. And we have to acknowledge that for what it is, no matter to the degree we may have wanted it to be what we hope for it to be. And us going to chase and going to get a why doesn't change the reality of the decision. Even though we think we found a loophole, even though we think we found a reason to hold on just a little longer, to hold on to the potential, to hold on to this and hold on to that, it keeps us from acknowledging the reality. I did this, y'all. I've shared it before on here numerous of times. It's not my only rejection, but it's one of the landmark ones that actually helped me push forward to living a healthier life, to addressing these things that I didn't even know were really present until it happened. You know, I used to be a kind of person that would leave things out in the air. I was kind of either or. It was never really a balance. I was that type of person that would read between the lines. I would assume what you were doing based on your behaviors, and I would just take an exit because it was just better for me not to even discuss it, to not even have a conflict or a discussion about it. I would just leave. Now that, you know, maybe has its place depending on the behaviors, but oftentimes can also be associated to maybe just an avoidant trait. Not even necessarily that you have an avoidant attachment. It's just an avoidant trait, right? And I think that's a difference that we have to acknowledge too. Sometimes people have traits of these. It doesn't mean that they're attachment styles. It just means that they have a trait. Okay. Now, of course, if their traits are lists that easily match one or the other, okay, you might have an argument. But sometimes some of us just carry traits. We don't carry the entire style. Okay. There's a lot that goes into it, even further than what we're talking about here. Again, this is just scratching the surface. But I remember, you know, this was actually one of the first times that I was actually challenged to do what I thought was a growing opportunity, to have the conversation, because I'm just typically used to just leaving it in the air, walking away and just taking whatever story that I could come up with and hanging on to it. I mean, I've had a lot of friends and people who walked away, blocked me off Snapchat, blocked me off this, and I never knew why. And it bothered me. It bothered me because I thought we had such a great connection. I thought we had such a great friendship. And for you to do that, something I never thought you would do, I associated the social media status that we carried together when we were connected, when that was no longer there, when the Snapchat streak was no longer there, when we were no longer following each other on Instagram. I just associated that as like, oh, we're not cool anymore. And then my thought went to, well, what did I do? What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? I've been ghosted. What did I do? What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? These constant questions that showed up. And so this was one of them. The dating was well. And then the third date went well. And then just kind of asking where we were with the relationship, where we were trying to go. I was really being intentional with things. It just didn't turn out in my favor. And I remember that first message and I felt awful. My heart was crushed. And so I went back and forth for about a good month on whether or not I should go back and get an answer, you know, because there was a part of me deep down that thought that maybe this could change if I got the answer. It wasn't because it wasn't because of what I convinced myself. Okay. I had coaching, I had counseling, I had community around me who was helping me through this entire process. Thank God for those guys who were there with me throughout that entire time. But y'all, I convinced myself really well that like, hey, if I go get this answer, I'm good. I'll actually be able to get some sleep at night. Regardless, I'll be able to let go. But in reality, it was me in hopes that this could actually be a door that was still opened, an opportunity for me to still connect and for me to still get what I ultimately hoped for from the beginning, to romantically get into this relationship. I had the clarity call. That's what I called it. She was so gracious. She did not owe me that by no stretch of the imagination. She gave it. She was so gracious. The call was actually so much better than I kind of anticipated. And from that call, you know what I did? Instead of still acknowledging what was said, that ended up being the same thing that was said later on, I just continued to build on the stories in my head of what I thought was the real situation. That's all I did. And it was terrible. It was really terrible on my part. And my desire to get the clarity call and get to know why was all because I was not ready to let go. I was in fear of letting go, right? And I was just not at peace with who I was and ultimately who God called me to be, to keep me from chasing after people who just did not want to be connected to me in the same manner I wanted to be connected to them, and learning to handle rejection properly and healthily. So I stopped taking things so strongly offensively. I wasn't able to let it go. I wasn't able to let it go. There was no part of me that was ready. There was no part of me that thought, what if this doesn't happen? I continuously buried those thoughts because in my mind, I was like, man, as soon as that enters, dang, it may not happen and I'm not ready for that. I wasn't at peace. So my need to know why came from an unhealthy place, and nothing changed. Nothing changed. And that was such a growing moment for me, though, as I look back on those, because it's what pushed me to understand that not needing to know why, right, is a healthy way to go about some of these connections and relationships. When I love who I am enough, I don't need to take every rejection personal. I don't need to take every no personal. And more importantly, I don't need to chase after people who are slowly walking out of my life to try to put on a PowerPoint presentation to convince them why I should be the one they choose and why I'm a no-brainer. Sometimes you're just not going to be everybody's preference. Just because you're not everybody's preference, and others aren't your preference all the time either. We have to be okay with being rejected, y'all. It doesn't mean it won't sting. It doesn't mean it won't hurt. We have to have a way to heal through that. And we'll talk about that too. But we have to have a healthy rejection. We have to have a healthy relationship with rejection, because this is actually what's going to build resilience in us to keep moving forward and not allow somebody's no to keep us from experiencing the love of the Father and love that we desire interpersonal and interconnected relationships with others. I got to hurry. My timer's going off. Okay. I got like 9 more minutes. I'm gonna be quick. Always and never. Those are terms. Yep. These are another sign of anxious attachment. Using terms like always and never. I'll always be with you. I'll never leave you. I always envisioned you. I've been praying about you forever. I always love you. I'm never going nowhere. We use all of these quick terms as a means to control the narrative and control the speed of the relationship. Try to speed it up. Try to make it faster, right? Some of these you may have heard in love bombing scenarios, where they told you all that you wanted to hear, but it was all in efforts to actually control the pace of the relationship, right? And you thought on the other end, I'm getting everything I ever wanted here. This is an answered prayer. When in reality, it wasn't, because it was happening fast. It was happening speedily. And when it came time to show consistency, the consistency was absent, because it all was poured onto you so fast that's why they were gone. They came and went in the first 2 weeks. Always and never can be easily signs of anxious attachment, because you're clinging. And anytime you're using always or never, you're using absolutes at stages that don't demand them. Okay. At stages that don't demand them. Hurriedness, we kind of just summarized that, right? You're hurrying as a way to not allow others to process. Again, that refers back to the love bombing perspective, where you're just moving in a hurry. And I have to tell you that relationships in which God is in the midst does not move at a hurried pace, because hurry is an incompatible component to love. 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient. Now, I'm not telling you that people who get married in the span of 2 months to 6 months or a first year of knowing each other is in a hurry. Okay, I think we all have to be willing to discern and decide whether or not where we are and how we're moving about this is in a hurried pace. Okay, what I will tell you, though, is that those people who do get married in those spans, that's not everybody's story. Again, that can be an exception to the rule. That can't be something that we put a period where it might require more of a comma. Not every relationship that's Christian based gets married in the span of 6 months. And if they don't get married in the span of 6 months, that doesn't mean that they were having sex. That doesn't always mean that they were being immoral. That doesn't always mean that the man was indecisive. That doesn't mean that he doesn't want to be married. Right now, I do think that if you're going, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years dating, we do need to raise some questions. However, right, it is important to know that typically, most times, most relationships, they just need some processing. They need some time to really cultivate, right, to get to see each other in all these seasons, right? And it doesn't necessarily take you 10 years to figure out your decision. It don't take you a whole year sometimes to know your whole decision. Sometimes you want to marry them. You just got to get your finances in order so you can marry them, or at least give the wedding you want. I have some different views on that too. Maybe perhaps instead of waiting to just do the dream wedding up front, you put the dream wedding off later. You go to the courthouse to the justice of the peace and you get married. That's a way. I know it ain't favorable, right? Just a thought. Who knows if I'll do that? Let me just say it like that. I do think it's a thought. I think it's a valid thought. Will I be the one to do that? I've said I would. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. But again, I just think hurriedness definitely can be a symbolic gesture of an anxious attachment. And that's also what anxiety does. It hurries you beyond the present, hurries you beyond where you are. Okay. And then the last piece, external validation. Oh man, we live in a generation and a time where everybody wants to be validated. Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody, all of this. And truth is that even though validation literally is a part of our human design, I actually have a video on that. I'll link it in the description, just explaining that validation is actually a reference to the ventral vagal nervous system, which again, we feel safe when people validate us through their bodily responses. Okay. Eye contact, head nodding, right? They're leaning in with the conversation. It automatically commits and communicates to our brain, hey, this is a safe person or this is a safe environment. But again, in the opposite, when none of those things are happening, right? Eye roll, contempt, okay, slouching, you see the body language, the sighing, right? All these kinds of things that begin to communicate to you that this may not be as safe, right? That's literally the ventral vagal nervous system branch, right? That's happening. That's literally communicating to you. And this is something by design. Hear me when I say this, though. Even though this is a design, this does not mean that everybody is required to validate you. Because the greatest validation that we can receive is from who? You guessed it, the Father. Yeah, Matthew 3:17. This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. Jesus was identified and validated before doing any miracle, before going into his ministry, before going into the wilderness as a quality check for the ministry he was called to, where he would ultimately lay his life down for us so that we may live forever with him. Right? And so external validation cannot be a solution to dealing with this. Because external validation is actually what's keeping you waiting for people to be what they don't have the capacity to be, or they simply don't want to be for you. And it's keeping you in levels and waves of disappointment that you eventually have to take ownership of in order to heal from. You can't keep waiting for people to show up in some way that they just don't have the capacity to. And external validation, external solutions don't work, because validation is ultimately an internal job. Just like peace is an internal job, validation is an internal job. And we cannot continue to chase after people for this external validation that just isn't there. Okay. And because I'm running out of time, I did have an analogy, but you know what? We might have to save that for another time, because I got to get this over to you. Okay. I got to get this over to you. I can't believe it's already been an hour. I got to get this over to you on some biblical text to help us release our grip from this anxious attachment. Okay. And I first want to go to Psalm 27:10. We got to be quick here. Psalm 27:10. This is a massive one, and this is going to be in relation to just the whole concept that we started this whole conversation off with, right? Understanding, though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. And it's just this capacity to understand that even though your mother and father weren't who they thought they should have been, or who you thought or needed them to be, even though they did not affirm you, validate you, even though you felt neglected, you were not affirmed in your identity. There were so many stages of development that you feel underdeveloped in, and you don't ever skip the stages of development. You are underdeveloped, right? They're slower because there are certain things that you were not given as a child. Right? You weren't given that affirmation. You weren't celebrated. You weren't loved. You weren't cared for. You saw love as an inconsistency. Maybe you were the child who had to turn around and take care of your mother and father because they were on drugs, or because they were sick, right? Because you had to be the one to cover all the bills. You had to be an adult at your teenage years. You had to be an adult taking care of your parents when the parents should have been the ones, right? But because of their inability or ineligibility, right, you had to step up. And so there's a lot that you were missing, and there's a lot that's gone missing. But I'm wanting to tell you that what your mother and father failed to do for you and how they failed to show up for you, God is the fulfiller of such. That's his promise. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. That's the beautiful promise that we are able to hold on to as believers, knowing that the Lord has the capacity to fill what my parents may not have given me. I know my parents neglected me, but I will never be neglected by my Heavenly Father. I know that my dad wasn't around, my mom wasn't around, but hey, my Father is present. I know that I didn't get the attention that I thought I needed. I know that I wasn't loved and appreciated and celebrated like I needed. And it led me down these paths where I kept performing for other people. But the Father reminds us through Psalm 27:10 that not only will he have us as we are, but he loves us as we are. We're welcomed into his arms as we are. And he is the fulfiller of what we thought we lacked the entire time because of what our parents didn't give, because of what our parents weren't, because of what they didn't do, because of what they failed to do. We get to depend on the Father. And we get to literally rest in him because really our souls are the ones that's screaming. Oftentimes we're trying to figure all this out externally. And really the key is that our souls are thirsting. Really quickly, women ask this question at the soul level: am I lovable and who will love me? And when this question is not initially answered, what they do is you go after beauty, comparison, performance, sex as a measure to prove your worth, to prove that you are lovable. You convince yourself that if I have sex with him, then he will love me. If I give him everything he wants, then he will love me, right? This all comes from a performance-based, right? And the breakups that happen, the separations that happen, you begin to question if you're qualified to even experience such a love. All stemming from asking this question that your soul desires. Men, it's different. Men ask, am I worthy and how will I prove it? And so again, when you're not celebrated for just simply being who you are, and the celebrations only came when you succeeded, only came when you won, only came when you elevated, when something happened, then that's training you to believe that you have to continue to what? Perform in order to what? Be loved. Now, your performance, our performance shows up different. Maybe it's through money, status. It's through success. It's through the job and workplace. It's through the muscle gains that we try to accomplish in the gym. Ain't nothing wrong with none of those things individually. However, when it all comes from a place of trying to prove that we're valuable, that's when we're wrong, because the Father reminds us again in Matthew 3:17 that we are his sons, we are his daughters, and he is well pleased. And the performance in you can be healed when we actually look to the Father who restores us holistically, not just mentally and emotionally, which is important, but also spiritually, because oftentimes our souls are what's hurting most. Yes, we're feeling it mentally and emotionally, but there's a thirst our soul has that only Jesus himself can fully quench, that we've been running to other men, other women, other beds, other legs, other money, other status, other things to fulfill. The Father fulfills this for us. Okay? That's the biggest thing that I want to give to you. I want to give you two more scriptures to really help this make sense, because we've already referred to Matthew 3:17. We referred to Proverbs 3, verse 5 through 6. I want you to look at 1 Corinthians 13. Now, I could spend forever on this, but again, I'm already out of time. So I want you to look at this, 1 Corinthians 13, and this is the entire love chapter. Okay, and I've actually have a whole series breaking this down. I probably should redo it because I think there's a lot more I can give to it, especially with as much as we've kind of learned recently. But this is what I want you to see. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. This is so beautiful, because love in and of its essence, as we talked about earlier, is incompatible with hurry, because what? Love is patient. We also learn that love is an open hand. Love is not clingy. Love is not chasing. Love is not performance-based. Love is an open hand. Because in order to experience a love that is patient, in order to experience a love that is kind and doesn't envy and doesn't boast and is not proud, it has to be a love that allows you to be chosen just as much as you choose those whom you love. And the greatest love is proven through Christ, who chose to go to the cross, died for the sins of humanity, you included, that we may have life with him. He leads us in the example of what love looks like. And he says love is a choice. Not love is a choice in the measurement of how culture might put it and how LGBT might put it. No, it's love is a choice. Love is a choice, because love without the choice, without the decision to nurture the emotional stirring that one is occurring, makes love a mockery, makes marriage a mockery. And the only way that love can even exist is in a world where free will exists, the ability to choose. Okay. And so we have to be okay with people not choosing us, even though we may choose them. And the greatest part about letting that happen is knowing that whether or not we're chosen by them, we are already chosen. It's all about an awareness thing, y'all, where we understand that we are already chosen by the greatest love. And this is what gives us the capacity to love from a place of peace instead of chasing love for peace. Loving from a place of peace instead of chasing love for peace. When you learn to love from a place of peace, you're willing to accept all no's for the one right yes. When you love from a place of peace, you don't find yourself chasing after people to prove to them why you should have been chosen. Or better yet, carrying a chip on your shoulder, going from man to man and woman to woman, trying to prove why the last one wasn't the right one and why you are better off without them. Ooh, yeah. Let that sizzle in your spirit. Like you literally are giving yourself the opportunity to recognize that whether they stayed or whether they left, yes, it still hurts. Yes, it wasn't expected. Yes, tears may flow. Yes, it may alarm some stuff in you that were laying dormant that you didn't recognize were there until they departed. And now I get an opportunity to realign with my values. I get an opportunity to realign with what really matters. And I get to move forward, continuing to rest in the truth that even though they didn't stay, I have a Father who always stays, who never leaves me nor forsakes me. This gives me the confidence and stability to love again, to try again, but more importantly, to live beyond who I thought I could not live without now that they're gone. I said a lot there, but I've already held you too long. And I can't even go further in this, okay? But I hope that this made sense in our conversation discussing anxious attachment. And I got to give you just a few applications to hopefully begin to kind of, really move forward in this. Number one is to start giving yourself what you're waiting for others to give you, okay? Oftentimes that external validation, those external solutions, you're waiting for people to be what they don't have the capacity to be or what they don't want to be for you. And you're waiting for them. And it's constantly keeping you in these repetitive cycles of disappointment, thinking people aren't enough, thinking people aren't worth nothing, simplifying all men are trash, all women are trash, right? That all comes from you waiting for people to do something what you have to start doing for yourself. No relationship ought to come with somebody being full and the other person being empty. Come together full so that when you both are pouring into each other, right, you go into a status of overflow. And when you go into a status of overflow, this allows the other person to be able to be poured in just as you are being poured in. So how do you want to come in overflowed? How do you want to come in full? Well, we got to start giving ourselves what we're waiting on other people to give you. Start celebrating the gifts in you. Start celebrating the talents in you. Start moving in gratitude, meditating, investing in you, choosing to take a moment to invest in what you need. Nurture that child in you. Nurture what you were neglected of. Remind yourself of how amazing you are with or without the money, with or without the comparisons, with or without what parents couldn't give you. Remind yourself of these things. Journal it out. Write it out every day, 5 times a day, no matter how many times a day. Remind yourself of these things because with repetition, consistency, and discipline is how you are going to nurture this. Rewire your brain to be able to look for the best in you instead of always looking for what's not in you. Okay? Secondly, ask and answer this one question. What's one unique gift about you that makes you special? And how can you use this gift to be a blessing to others today? Rewind that if you want to hear that again. This is what's going to heal your need for external validation. Because when you learn to celebrate yourself, others who tag along is additional, not necessary. We want to get to a place where God's love in our lives is so central, so crucial, but more importantly, because of how God loves us, we learn to love ourselves in a similar way. We learn to love ourselves fully. We learn to love ourselves for who we are, where we are, what we're doing as we're continuing to heal and do the healing work. Okay. This gives us the permission to look at what other people may give us outside of us as something that's an addition, not something that's necessity to live. That's a huge difference. This is what gives us the ability to live from peace, not continue to pursue and chase people for peace. Number 3, compare your stories to truth. I want you to even get a list, get a T-chart, write it out. One side, the stories that your mind is running. On the right side, the truth. In the moment when your mind is running, what are the stories that you're telling yourself? Write it out and be as honest as possible. And then on the other side, what's the truth though? What's really happening? What's the behaviors? What is the history with this person? What's the consistency that they've shown me? Are they showing me through their behaviors that these stories make sense? Or are they showing me through their behaviors that this is just me? Or is this more so pointing to things that I have yet to really heal through? Or is this really bringing up an alarm, right? That I have to go deeper into my healing. I got to go deeper. There's another layer. So do it. It's important, right? What am I believing about this situation, this person, or myself that leads me to feel the way they would leave? Where does this come from, right? And has this person given you the reason to believe this? It's very important because you'll find roots, you'll find consistencies, you'll find all these different places that actually speak to it. All right. And then finally, have grace for yourself, y'all. It's a process. You're not going to get this overnight, and you're not going to get this in one day. As we've said throughout this pod, repetition, consistency, and discipline is what is required in order to get this done. It's going to take some time. Give yourself the time. Okay? Give yourself the time. Don't expect yourself to have this all figured out in one day, in 1 week, in 1 month. It's with repetition, consistency, and discipline that you're going to find yourself less looking for external solutions, less finding yourself going crazy that somebody rejected you, less of somebody, chasing after people who are slowly walking out of your life. And you're going to find yourself more and more stabilized because you've learned through this healing work that it is not worth chasing people who don't want to be a part of your life. And when you love yourself enough and love who God made you to be enough to be okay with people walking out of your life, you will not find yourself putting on PowerPoint presentations to convince them to stay. Because if there might not be anything worse in a relationship than making somebody stay when they don't want to stay. That's one way to feel lonely in the connection that you thought was going to be beautiful. And it is better to be by yourself, loving yourself, than to be connected to somebody who you have to constantly perform for in order to keep up with. And I don't believe even biblically God would support such a thing. Have grace for yourself. It's a process, okay? Learning to loosen your grip and letting it go is a daily practice. Go from white knuckling to open hand. Because when we go in an open hand, guess what God loves to do? When he sees a generous giver in an open hand, he loves to just continue to put things in your hand and in your possession because he knows he can trust you with it. He knows he can trust you with them. He knows he can trust you with where they are. He knows you can trust you with the journey. And he also knows he can trust you not to take control of it to where if you hold on too tightly, he's going to pry your hand open. That's one of the best ways because it's God sharing. He can trust you with them. He can trust you with that. Okay. You will have moments where someone may not validate you, say something to you, appreciate you. Call that out and give it to yourself in this process. Call it out. All of this starts with honesty. And if you can't be honest with yourself, you cannot heal your attachment style and you cannot grow from anxious to secure with God at the center. Honesty is the best policy. Self-awareness is the best policy. Taking ownership for this is the best policy. And it's how you're going to be able to move forward. All right. All right, y'all, we made it. I mean, we're getting better. It's an hour 15. I'll take it. I hope this conversation was so helpful. This is just the beginning. There's so much more that we could possibly dive into this as layers on layers of this is uncovered. But please take what we found here, consider it, meditate on it, and continue processing through it as you continue to chase after, to pursue, to build, to be prepared for happy, healthy, whole relationships, biblical relationships with yourself, with others, and with God. All right. Comment below any kind of thoughts that you have from this conversation. What's the biggest takeaway? Share this with a friend. And I can't wait until our next conversation. I'm thinking you're going to enjoy it. Until then, be easy and be breezy, my friend. Oh, don't forget, Feel to Heal. Feel to Heal, link in the description. This is a simplistic guide to understanding your emotions. I want you to check it out. If you go and you purchase the ebook, you will also get an opportunity to go in on a Feel to Heal repair mini course. Okay. This mini course is designed to help you repair your relationships and learn how to be okay with where you are, with who you are, even if others around you in your relationships aren't where you want them to be. You can still heal and recover without needing them to be someplace in order for you to do it. Okay. I want you to check it out. It's at half off. Okay. If you go and purchase the Feel to Heal ebook, when you go and get the mini course is at a half price off. Okay. That thing is typically selling for about $150. It'll be half off once you get there. Okay. And I probably should be charging more. I'm trying to give y'all something, a gift. All right. A gift from me to you to really help you move forward in your relationships. Okay. So I'm really excited for you to check that out. Link is in the description. I'll see you over there. Until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy. Peace.